Hey, this is Stephanie Henry. I'm here for M5, kind of just to discuss some feedback I've given to students in the past and maybe how I could improve on that feedback a little bit. So before I actually start talking about the feedback I gave my students, I kind of like to talk about what I asked my students to do. So you have kind of a background in what they were supposed to do. So we were studying ecology when I gave this feedback, and I had my students kind of come up with an experimental design, and then they actually carried out the lab, and then they had to write a lab report on it. So this kind of just gives some instructions on what they're supposed to do. So basically we were looking to see how competition in ecosystems drives natural selection, and organisms select a particular niche based on that competition. So, and we were pretending like we were birds, and they had a different beak, and there were several, each person was a different bird, and they had a different type of beak to enable them to get different types of food. So one person had a spoon, one person had tweezers, one person had scissors, one person had a spring clothespin, and one person had a toothpick. And then there were all sorts of assorted types of pretend food, and they would pick up the food with the beak that they had and put it in their stomach, which was just a little cup. And they were supposed to pick up the food that they could most easily pick up first. So there were little pieces of rubber bands, marshmallows, flakes of cereal, paper clips, and pebbles that they were supposed to pick up. And then they continue until all the food was gone. And then they would count how many types of food that they got. And then in part 2, we only had marshmallows, and there were an organism with toothpicks and clothespins, because they were supposed to kind of be learning that the principle of competitive exclusion, where if 2 organisms occupy the same niche in the same population, one will basically die out to the other. And so that kind of explains what I wanted them to do in the lab. And then I am just going to go back in and show you some feedback that I gave the students, a group of students that I had. So I'm going to pull that up here in a second. And then I'll kind of explain that a bit. So just let me share my screen here again. I removed all data, so you are not able to tell any information about the students. But basically I had a rubric, and this kind of is the rubric that I had. So for class participation, this set of group of students, and it was a group working together, they did receive all points for helping with both preparing the lab report and also the experiment itself. And basically, just if you participate equally with your other lab partners and are on task, it's pretty easy to get all 25 of those points. Then I had a lab planning sheet like you saw on the previous screen, and they have fully filled that out. And it looks like they had missed some questions. They hadn't quite fully filled that out yet. And then we go on to the lab report. And the lab report required a title page, an abstract, introduction, the hypothesis, materials and procedures, results and conclusion, references, and then the formatting, grammar, things like that. And so for the most part, they did pretty well here. They got full points on the title page. They lost just like a quarter of a point on an abstract. They lost a point on the introduction and hypothesis. Looks like they got full points for the material and procedures. They lost just like a half a point on the results and conclusion. And then the references they got full points on. And then there were just some minor grammar errors, so they lost a half point there. And The grammar I did, you can annotate on their actual lab report too. And so you can't see that here, just so I don't show the students information, but I did annotate kind of some of the grammar errors that I found. However, if I were to do this again, there are definitely some things that I would do differently. So one of the strategies that we learned about was to be instructive rather than evaluative. And so their introduction and hypothesis, I had asked them, or I had given a sample of a lab report, and I had asked that it was 3 paragraphs long. And then it included research about natural selection and competition and the competitive exclusion principle, and a written hypothesis. And they only had 1 paragraph. But I feel like here I just kind of wrote that this should be a longer portion of their paper, and it was kind of weak. And so I feel like here I was more evaluative than instructive. So I didn't give them good pointers on what they should have done. So if I were to do this again, probably what I would do is have like an audio or maybe an audio video feedback in addition to this, and just kind of go in and show them, hey, this should be 3 paragraphs long. Here are some things that you should include in here. Also, they didn't use in-text citations, so I would go back and show them how to do that. So that's one thing that I would do differently if I were to do this again. This was, again, one of the first lab reports that they had ever written. And so I didn't really begin with a check-in. So I probably would have done that, begun with a check-in, just to kind of, then I would have noticed, hey, they need to maybe work a little bit more on their introduction and hypothesis, and I could have helped them along with that. And so the end result would have been better. And I also think that I could have improved by being more specific. Again, here with the introduction, I said it was weak, which was, again, evaluative, but not really telling them how to fix it. So I could have been more specific there. Maybe with the grammar, I did kind of show them on the paper what they did, but I could maybe be more specific there. And also the results and conclusion, I feel like I could be a little bit more specific there. So the things that I would do differently next time, 1, I would, again, be more instructive rather than evaluative, especially with that introduction hypothesis. 2, I would begin with a check-in, which I really didn't do, maybe so I could kind of see how they were progressing and then give them a chance to fix it, so that they learn how to do it properly rather than just have them turn it in at the end. And then 3, I would be more specific in the feedback that I gave them. So hopefully that helps and makes sense. And thank you so much for listening.